In this video, we're going to be modeling a couple of tables for use in our staged renders. As far as the projects go, these aren't, the most important pieces of them, but they will help give us a nicer sheen on our displaying of our objects. So, first off, we're going to start off with a cylinder. Just going to draw it right in the middle here, give it a tiny bit of height. We can scale these tables later, so don't worry about the scale too much now, but we want to pay more attention to ratios. For my radius, I'm going to put 50. For my height, I'm going to put 2.5. That'll give us a nice little thickness for a round table here. Height segments, we're going to drop that down to 0. Cap segments, leave it 1. And sides, let's increase that up to 64. That gives us a little bit more rounded look there. We could have stuck with the 18, but since we're going to be dealing with a wide variety of general quality models, I figure the 64 will give us a nice middle ground for polygon count versus quality. So once we've done that, I want to go ahead and select this. I'm going to clone this table, little tabletop. Make a copy of it, click on the modifier tab, and we're going to increase the radius to 52. So this first table, I'm going to go for a glass and metal feel. This inner cylinder here is going to represent the glass. I'm going to clone that. And on the clone, we're going to give it some height. The exact height doesn't matter, just so long as it can neatly fit through these cylinders down here. And I am going to drag it down just so there's no issues with the modifiers that we'll be using. Let's go ahead and name this. That's going to be called our ring cutout. Cylinder 2 is going to be called our, it's going to be called our brim. And cylinder 1 is going to be called glass. There we go. So now we're going to select the brim. We're going to go to compound objects. So create new object, standard primitives to get the pull down list, select compound objects. Once again, we go to boolean, add operands. Then we're going to select subtract. And then we're going to click our ring cutout reference. And because our glass is visible at the moment, it's kind of difficult to see what just happened. So if I toggle the eyeball here, you can see that when I turn the glass off, there's a solid ring around where the glass is. Up next, we're going to click on our material editor. And if your material editor button doesn't look like that, it'll look like that right there. I just prefer this mode for it. Presets, let's find solid geometry glass. Make sure we have the glass selected. And then we can either press A on the keyboard or click material and then assign a selection. And that assigns it to our glass cylinder there. Up next, we're going to select the brim. We're going to select a different material slot. And we're going to find, let's go with matte gold, satin gold. And I'm going to do material, assign to selection. And I'm going to render this real quick to show you a flaw. It's kind of hard to see the gold here. Part of the reason why that is because a lot of the definition for the gold material is in light reflection. And at the moment, we just have a void in the background, so there's nothing really to reflect the light off of. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to rendering, and then go to environment. And then where it says environment map here, right underneath it, it says none. We're going to click on that. And then you see under OSL, there's environment here. HDRI environment. These are predefined environments for us. Just pick one that you like. I'm going to go with, let's go with the forest for now. It's going to be really out of place, but you know, nothing wrong with being out in the forest. So now if I render it, the gold has a little bit more going on there. You see the glass is reflecting very horribly off of the environment. Maybe we'll go for a different environment here. And the gold, I really don't like the way the gold turned out on that, so instead of satin gold, let's try polished gold. That might be a little too reflective. But we can play around with the materials later. Our next step is going to be creating the table legs. Round table usually has 3 legs. So I'm going to go to Standard Primitives, select on Box. I'm going to zoom in right here. And then just draw a little bit of a box there. And drag it down. It's not quite as far as I want to go with it, but let's set the height to -100. As far as the height segments go, I'm going to change that to 100 as well. Length and width, I'm not too concerned about that, but I do want to move this slightly inward so that that flat side is completely touching the brim and not sticking out in either direction. The next step is we're going to make this table look a little bit more fancy by adding a couple of modifiers to it. So first modifier we're going to add is our twist modifier, which is all the way down here. And if I drag the angle up, what you'll see happening is the leg starts to get a twisting effect happening to it. I think I'm going to go with 1200 for this. And if I click off of it, you can see it's got that twisting from top to bottom. After that, I want to add a bend modifier. We're just going to bend this in like that. So from there, I'm going to grab scaling, scale it so that it goes all the way across to the other side. And then on the height, it's a little short right now, so let's scale it down like that. So now we've got this curvature going down like that. Now we could have done all of that with just a bend and the box, but sometimes I'm just a little lazy on how I do things. If I look over here, downside of being lazy, our box is extending just a little bit further than planned. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to add a edit poly modifier. Polygon selection. Grab that bit right there. Then if I just scale it along the z-axis here, we can get it so that it's all still just touching the brim and not sticking out from it. There we go. So that's step, I actually don't know what step number we're on right now. It is the first leg though. So we need 3 of these things. So I'm going to right click on it, clone it, create a copy, and then I'm going to go to rotate, and on the z-axis I'm going to type in 120. Why 120? 360 divided by 3 is 120. 360 degrees in a circle, which means if I were to have each of these evenly spaced out in rotation, 120 is the number I need. And I'm just going to move this down here. Try to find the right spot. Now we could do a little bit of math to find the right spot, but again, this is just for display purposes, and really we're only going to be seeing the top part of the table. This bottom part is just in case we decide to use it for something else. So right click on that, clone it again, let it make a copy. We're going to rotate it 240. And you'll notice it went to negative 120. That's because 240 and negative 120 are the same point in a 360 degree arc. So let's drag this up. And position it. Well, that doesn't look right to me, but let's go right there for now. It's definitely not right. So the problem I'm facing here is they're not in the right spot because I did not use the math in order to figure out where they're supposed to be. That should be close enough there. Except this one is touching the glass. We don't want it touching the glass. There we go. So now we have this table with the 3 twisty legs all joining up the bottom there. I'm going to select all 3 of them. Go to our our material editor. Material assign to selection. So they now all have that same gold look that the rim does. If I render this out, this is what it currently looks like. Let's try a different metal real quick. So if I just select on our finishes here and go with stained copper and then render again, you'll notice that it changes all of the material, the material on all the items that were using the same material slot to the stained copper. It's personal preference. I like this better. You can go for whatever material you want for that. We'll go ahead and close that out. And that's our first table there. So up next, we are going to work on something that's probably a little bit of overkill as far as a table goes. We're going to drop a tablecloth over top of it using physics. Fun, fun. Now I'm going to create a new object, and I'm going to go for plane. I'm going to draw a square about like that. And then I'm going to drag it up a bit. That was rotate, not move, sorry. So if we drag this up a bit, we actually want to go ahead and drag everything up. So here's a quirk of the physics engine. It can be set to different values if you want. However, by default, with the physics engine, this black line right here is going to be the ground. Again, you can change the default value, but let's just go ahead and stick with this for now. On our plane, it says it's at 4x4. This is going to be way too few. So I'm going to go to the modifier tab. I'm going to increase my length and width segments. The higher we change this value, the longer the process is going to take. I'm going to set it to 25 by 25. It's a bit excessive in how long it's going, and how much it is, but the higher the value, the more accurate it's going to be. So there's that part right there. Up next on our modifier list, we want to add a cloth reactor to it. So there it is right there. So it says mcloth, that's MassFX cloth. MassFX is part of the physics system that this program uses. So if I do mcloth, cloth behavior, I'm going to leave it at dynamic. If you set it to kinematic, that means, well, let me think of a way to put that. If an object is kinematic, then external forces do not apply to it, but it can apply force to external objects. I'm just going to leave that there. Use global gravity, we want that. Capture states, we're going to ignore that for the moment. We're going to leave most of our properties as they are. From there, we're going to highlight all of this. And we're going to start doing some organization. So if I right click over here and click create layer, everything I had highlighted has been added to that layer. I'm going to click on the layer, rename it to table. Then if I double click on that and right click and then clone, I want a copy of it all and create layer. And this one is going to be renamed to tablecloth reference. All right, so I'm going to click the eyeball there. If you notice, when you click the eyeball on the layer, it shuts off everything in that layer. So then now if I highlight all of this and I come over here to the modifier list, I'm going to add a rigid body, MassFX rigid body. So this is going to start throwing it as part of the physics engine. Oops. Let's do this one object at a time. So when I had all of the objects selected at once, it was trying to apply a mesh collider that had all of the objects each time to each of the objects we're using. Not ideal. So again, when you add the MassFX rigid body object, it's going to generate a mesh collider for us, which is just the reference, the calculations for how other objects will see it whenever it's going to hit it. If an object does not have that mesh generated, it won't collide. Now right there you see it's trying to generate the mesh for this entire bit right there. It's not quite what we want there. So if we scroll down a bit, shape type says convex. We want to change that to custom. And then it'll use the mesh that is used for the rendering process. So once again, MassFX rigid body. Change it from convex to custom. And our third leg. And there we go. Next step, we want to change all of these to static. So when a rigid body type is set to static, as opposed to dynamic or kinematic, it's simply not going to move. No matter what happens, it's just going to stay where it is. You can use the timeline to manually adjust the animation for it, but as far as the physics effects go, using just the physics engine, nothing will move it on its own. So by setting all these to static, we don't have to worry about the tablecloth when it drops, knocking our table over. There we go. So let's turn our tablecloth back on. I'm going to select it. Let's set that back to the front view just because I don't know why I rotated. Alright, so we have that set. We have that set to dynamic. So our next step is going to be to bake it. So let's click on bake. And this will take a few minutes as it calculates the tablecloth falling onto the table. Now as you saw, there are some points where it kind of went wonky there. It actually clipped through the legs, which tells me that I did not have the legs set up properly. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, we just want the final resting spot, which we never reached. The reason why we never reached that is simply my timeline was too short. So we're going to unbake everything. Another thing I didn't like was how much of a flare we had right there. So let's delete our cloth reactor. Let's increase our segments to 100 by 100. This is going to greatly increase our calculation times. Then we're going to go back to rigid body cloth reactor, or MassFX cloth, sorry, mcloth. It's set to dynamic. Now let's not do forces. Let's look at our fabric properties. Pretty sure stretchiness and bendiness is what we want to change. So let's bring this up to a 0.5. And our timeline, let's increase that. Actually, you know what? If we come up here, yeah, no. Let's increase our timeline by clicking this button right here. And let's set our end time to 1000. That's 1000 frames of animation. Should have enough time for our cloth to come to a rest. So now if I come up here and I click bake, again, it's clipping through the legs, but at the end of the day, all I want is the final resting frame. And this will take a few moments. Alright, I hit stop on the action. It looked like everything had come to a stop right around 350. I'm just going to hit play real quick so you can see what the animation is currently doing. So you see, again, it's doing some clipping issues. We'll have to fix that, but we're not looking for the animation here. We're just looking for the end result. And the end result starts looking right about right there. So now, if I'm right here on the timeline where I'm at the end where I want everything to be, I'm going to click on this. I'm going to add an edit poly modifier. Then I'm going to use polygon selection to select every polygon in my tablecloth. I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to find detach. Right here it is. So I want to detach as a new object. If you detach it as an element, it'll let you detach it but still have it as part of the mesh. So then you can use the element selection up there. Detach as clone will leave the original but create the new copy of the object. We don't really care because we're just going to delete the original plane out in a moment. So I'm going to write down tablecloth for the name and click OK. And then I'm going to delete this right there. And just as a bit of cleaning up, I'm going to set my timeline back to 100. Just because that's where I prefer it to be. Now you see we still got some clipping issues with the tablecloth, so if I select the tablecloth and then go to my scaling tool, I believe if I just XY scale it just a tiny bit, yep, all the clipping issues are gone. So now we have a nice little tablecloth draped over our table. So if I position this like so, zoom out a tiny bit, and then render this. At the moment it's got kind of a plastic look to it because we haven't assigned any materials to it, but that's something we can fix later. In fact, let's go ahead and do that now. So we're going to go to a new set. We're going to go take a look at our finishes. Paints, none of these are right. None of these are right. Transparent materials. You're going to notice that really none of these make sense. But we have hot dog bun down here. I'm going to select that. I'm going to do material assign to selection. And if I'm not mistaken, that's going to take a lot of the extra sheen off of it and have it honestly closer to what a cloth material would look like. Now obviously we don't want these spots here, so we'll want to change out the texture with something else, but it does look more like a cloth rather than somebody just poured paint over top of our table. And to do that, I'm going to stop the video for a moment while I find a suitable texture for it. Okay, hopefully I've found a suitable texture for this, so I'm going to click on the M on base color. That'll bring us to here. I'm going to click M again. And usually right here is where we're able to assign an actual texture image. So let's click on where it says no map, bitmap lookup. And if I go to, I believe I put it in my pictures folder. Here it is. I'm going to open that up. That hasn't quite had the effect I want so far. I'm going to go up to the parent layer, go up again, and again. Our input, let's change that to a different color. Let's say blue or purple. Minimum, let's go to that. Max, that. This should give it a bit of a purple cloth color. So we're going to go up another layer. And honestly, that should have changed already. Reflections. Let's go ahead and change that. Transparency, we don't want that. Subsurface scattering. Let's go for a slightly lighter blue. Scatter color, also the lighter blue. Emissions, we don't want that. Bump map, we want our bump map to also be the same image that we used before. So bitmap lookup, select that. There's that. And let's see what this looks like. And unfortunately, most of that is just being defined by the shading as opposed to the texture. But you can't see little tiny effects of the texture going on there. Alternatively, if we click right here, we don't do anything special here, and instead we just click this, do bitmap lookup, select that, and then material assigned to selection. It starts looking more like that. Now our image is a little bit large for the texture, for the table there. So what we would want to do is tile it a bit. So then our tiling is not where I remember it being. Sorry about that, I was just really overlooking something simple here. So when we click on this, and then click on this, and scroll down to the bottom, the scale is going to tell us how many times we tile this across. So scale at 0.1 is going to tile it across once. 0.5 will tile the image across twice. 0.25 will tile it across 4 times. So then we're going to go up a couple of layers here, and then we have roughness right here. We'll explain what that one does real quick. If I go ahead and render this out, what you're going to notice is everything is really shiny. This is supposed to be tablecloth, made out of cloth. It's not really supposed to be shiny unless we're dealing with a plastic material. So let's fix that by increasing the roughness. So this is going to be on a scale of 0 to 1. If we go to 1, and then render, all of that reflective quality has disappeared. And we could leave it there if we wanted to, or we could find some type of medium between the two. And depending what we pick is going to it's going to alter just the general feel of the cloth. So I'm going to leave it alone right there. That said, I don't think I really want to bother with the coloring for now. Most of the time, I would just go into Paint or Photoshop or something and alter the texture. I think I'm kind of happy with where it's at right now. Now, obviously, if you want the glass to be showing, you'll just remove the tabletop. Doing so is pretty easy. With the tabletop selected, we can just click the eyeball right there. There's the glass back on it. So it's really up to you how you want to handle that. I'm going to turn that back on, and I'm going to save this as that. So in other projects, we'll import this in order to be able to use it, but it's saved there and ready to go.